Twitter and start tweeting. Hashtag KDHC 2017. Hashtag KDHC 2017.
Invite two of our special guests just for this session, the official opening.
Diasporas tended to limit or sever their relationship with the home country. They just went and, just got lost. It was virtually the lost generation, if you will. Very little ties with the country of origin, the early generation of diaspora. And being from Ethiopia, I know because I became a diaspora in the early 1970s, and for about a good 25, 30 years, had no contact with my own country till very recently.
And among our eminent guests, we had a former Ghanaian minister, as well as chief executives of a number of corporations, both public as well as private.
Over a 40-year plus career, I've spent more than half of that overseas, including some 18 years in the United States, working for a number of organizations, including the World Bank Group, some 3 years in Abidjan working for the African Development Bank, and in Tunis also for the African Development Bank, and 8 years working in London for the Commonwealth Telecom Organization as its first African chief executive in more than 100 years.
We are also looking for opportunities where we can provide investment possibilities to our diaspora and others.
Our financial independence has now reached a stage where we are fighting for our economic and our financial independence as African states. And I think there also that independence, that connectivity that we are talking about is not possible unless the diaspora community of Africans link up together as they did in the days when the Jomo Kenyatta's and the Nkrumah's and Zikwe's linked up to bring independence to Africa. So I'm proposing that among the many things that we should resolve this day is to also work towards an African diaspora homecoming convention.
We came from Makweni. We are trying to get a database of those people. And indeed, when they come home, because many of them do come home, they are able to contact us so that we work together. Sometimes it's very interesting that I can be told of a local problem by somebody who is from abroad, because the relatives have talked about this problem to this person abroad.
We had the CEO of CMA, the Capital Markets Authority, the CEO of Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority. We had the CEO of National Bank of Kenya. We had the CEO of Gulf Bank. We had CEOs of Housing Finance and a number of chief executives, Commissioner General of Kenya Revenue Authority, and a host of others. We had also of course, Vice Chancellor of Strathmore University, the Vice Chancellor of USIU, and Deputy Vice Chancellor from Technical University of Kenya.
In terms of the diaspora, we continue to see some of our intermediaries working to structure products like the government of Kenya. Structuring the diaspora infrastructure bond is well on the way to make sure that when you look at the transformation of Kenya, the amount of infrastructure going on, how are we making sure that everyone has a chance to participate in that? We're looking at securitization of diaspora remittances. We're talking about 1.3 billion And the year is still not over. There's a very strong cash flow element that can be securitized to really channel it into long-term investment and structure.
If you're not capable of giving, don't waste your time. That's all right. Hello, how are you? Fine, thank you. That's not what you are here for. If you have real, genuine desire, and many who are not here today in this room, if you want to make a change, let's create a possibility for them to do it. And I would suggest that that's the only way we can improve our country, because let's not only see the top figures, let's see the middle and the bottom figures, and that will give you the heart.
There are issues of freedom of the media itself. We are dealing with a new constitution that allows people to express themselves. We are dealing with a new arena of new technologies, online content distribution. Some of the content that we have had to ban, literally, some of the content we have said cannot come to Kenya, it cannot be exposed to our kids, is not because we are being homophobic. It's not because we are being unreasonable. We are actually following the law. In any case, you know, in Kenya, you can't go outside the law, even in regulation of the media. That's one area where you cannot even go outside the law.
Allow me to indulge you in this topic, aptly titled Assets Reunification for the Diaspora. Now, let me give you a brief history about the authority. Way back in 2007, the National Treasury convened a task force to examine the status of unclaimed financial assets in the country, and the findings of the task force led to the recommendations that the authority should be created and granted a legal framework. And all this culminated in the passing of the Unclaimed Financial Assets Act in 2011. So ours from that task force became a hybrid of international best practices, benchmarking, and successful jurisdictions. And indeed, as we speak today, if you look at our act, even when we go around, there aren't too many entities like ours. We are actually a first in Africa. There is no unclaimed financial assets authority in any other country in Africa.
If you ask any conventional banker today, what is Islamic banking about? The most likely answer they will give you is that they do not charge interest. And they charge something else, but which is the same in the end of the day. Now, when they say that they charge something else, that something else is never defined. The Sharia law considers interest as exploitative and injustice. And this started many years ago, those 1,400 years ago when the religion had begun, is that people were not looking for funds like today for business opportunities. People sometimes had genuine needs. Sharia says interest in any form. In fact, now it has put it throughout that whether it is exorbitant or cost of funds or cost of inflation, it is not acceptable in any way. And what it encourages to do, it says, do a partnership, do a trade, do something so that there is an equal share of risk and benefit to that transaction that you're doing.
Diasporans, therefore, first point, have to come back and build institutions, educational institutions, skill-based institutions. So we need to multiply the skilled labor across the whole continent, and this is the first place you have. At every secondary school in this country, there must be a technical school structured in such a way that that technical school can transform the region around it. Not technical schools for the sake of vocational and technical schools. Not technical schools that have a strategy within the region, within the county they are set up. If you tell me, okay, build carpentry, what's the use of telling me that in skilled labor? Or do mechanics. But if I go to Kiambu, I know it's coffee. So what is the supply chain and the supply path of coffee or of the cereals around there? If I go to Kitale, it is maize. What is the supply chain of means? Those technical schools must answer that question. You diasporans must try to help people understand those things that work where you are outside there, so that you can bring that wisdom here.
Apart from the Kenyans and friends of Kenya that attended, we also had the Irish ambassador who gave us a keynote. Very interesting situation and comparison of what's happening in Ireland, where there are the people inside Ireland are just about 4.5 million, and there are 70 million who are outside the country. It would be very interesting to see how they deal with their diaspora. But Ireland is one of the latest countries to come up with a ministry solely dealing with the diaspora affairs. We do know other countries which have such ministries. They include Nigeria, Georgia. They have exclusive ministries, and Cape Verde ministries of diaspora affairs, recognizing the import of diaspora. And this is one of the major things we are pushing for.
Our country has been defined by geography, by our isolation from Central Europe. We were very often, for many, many years, the poorest country in Europe. Our country has been defined by history. As I mentioned, we were colonized for years and years and years. And the fact that we worked so hard to get our independence, which we got in 1922, less than 100 years ago, but that struggle for years, for centuries, has defined us into a very strong people with a very strong sense of identity, a strong sense of culture, a strong sense of who we are. But also, because we're a small country, and for many years our population was about 8.5 million people, we had to be outward looking, because there was really very little future in our country for our people. Our economy, very few job prospects. Basically, people wanted to move overseas. They had to move overseas. In the 19th century, we had a famine in our country, the biggest famine ever in Europe, that wiped out over 1.5 million people of our population because of a dependence on Irish potato, actually, and the crop failed. And those that didn't die, most of them left. And they left the country to go to Europe, to go to the US, to go to Australia, to try, out of economic necessity, because there was very little back home.
Among other eminent diaspora leaders, we had the president of Kenya Swiss Association, we had the chair of Qatar Diaspora SACCO, and we had a host of other leaders from 32 different countries of the world.
The first thing I wanted to tell you is that actually we do have quite a number of alumni from Strathmore in the US, in the UK, and also in Australia and many other places. We have just registered our alumni association, and we are trying actually to make it more dynamic, and there are very many powerful people there who actually can help us to push the agenda of knowledge management and youth engagement.
That will slowly ensure the good of skill and development within the private sector slowly transforms the government and transforms the nature of the constitution of this country slightly to enable us ensure that private sector booms. In the second point is, in which area? The place where youth are going to be employed, ladies and gentlemen, without any doubt in my mind, is in the agribusiness sector and in the manufacturing sector. These are the two areas.
Our tax administration has changed the tax compliance approach to focus more on customer facilitation rather than the traditional enforcement methods. This means our revenue mobilization strategy is now more customer or taxpayer focused than tax collector oriented.
Also, we are aware that 25% of money coming in goes into investment. The bulk majority goes into family support, to food, to medicine, to school fees. We want more to go into investment, and we are looking at increasing from 25% to 30% money that goes into investment.
For the last 3 years, how they've been doing, and next year, I believe we will have at least every county will be represented in this place. So we'll be having 48 counties adding the diaspora as a county. I believe a lot that diaspora should be represented in the assemblies, should be the National Assembly, the Senate, the East African Parliament, and all of the places. Because every other place, women have been represented, disabled have been represented, every else has been represented. I don't see why diaspora people are segregated and they're not given a chance to be part of the team.
Waters for 3,000 square kilometers. We have 39 of 55 countries in Africa are touching the water. And the trade continent is not so good, but that is where the opportunity is. It's not good, but that's where the opportunity is. Because if you look at the other countries, the Asian Americans, they're doing 60, 57, 60, others are beyond 60. Intra-regional trade among themselves. And that's why we feel very happy when we hear those major projects coming up, linking Africa together.
On an affirmative action, again on STEM, in partnership with UNESCO, we are actually doing a program where we are mentoring girls to make sure that they like science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We realize, seriously, 52% of the best candidates are ladies in folk form. And they don't go to the university. And some they disappear in that time.
Regulator. We are setting up a regulatory sandbox so that we can create a much more facilitated environment for fintech innovation to grow, so that we can open up opportunities for participation, for access, and for impact.
I may also just mention that a major recommendation that has come out of this convention is that we want to set the initial stages of how do we attain the goal of doubling the 250 billion Kenya shillings that come into Kenya every year. Within the next 5 years, we want it to be double, to be 500 billion Kenya shillings coming per year.
One of them is this, that persons coming back to this country must have had change of heart, completely change of heart. That I'm living now in Australia, where there is almost free power, free water, free cooking gas, fairly free education for the youths that they have gone there and married, stayed there, and a bit of freedom in thinking and doing certain things. Popularize the return of our persons out there. Let us exactly explain what these good persons are coming back to join under the conditions.
Allocate to you a chairperson. When you get to the meeting, the first agenda is to elect or appoint a rapporteur. Once you do that, there are specialists in that category if they are there in the group. If they are not there, you can pick on 2 people to set the tone. You give them like 5 minutes each. What do they think about that sector? After that, then you will open the floor for discussion. Room. Talk in low tone so that people in another group, you don't interfere with them. The related question would be, what are the opportunities in that sector? In fact, you can even combine opportunities and challenges for that sector. Second would be, what are the solutions? Or if it's the opportunities, how do you tap? And then the last question you will address is, are there any practical steps from this convention that we can take forward to address those opportunities and those challenges? So there are largely 3 questions you will be addressing.
A lot of people don't invest because they give it to their family and for somehow the money disappears. So what we've done at Regal Africa is really work with licensed fund managers, licensed banks, credible real estate companies, credible agribusiness, credible businesses. Just basically what we're saying is for anyone in the diaspora to put money into a project, it has to be trustworthy. It needs to be credible. Now the big
thing about Kenya, not lived here for 18 years, setting up a huge investment bank with tons of money, 24 other investment banks that you all know, and having to learn the systems and competing with people who go to University of Nairobi who are 10, 15 years younger than me, who are feeling, what's this person doing, who has to leave every 20 minutes because their baby's crying in the background. But we set up the brokerage unit, and then I learned about the share market here, and slowly, with other Kenyans coming back from the diaspora, started getting involved with the Capital Markets Authority and trying to help bringing new products. The market was not ready, but they were very receptive. And so others went into other industries, people like...
In brief, we agreed that there isn't much information really about what is happening. There is no coordination, and so it's hard for us to know what is happening where and by who. In relation to academia, again, we talked about the low quality of education that we are offering in the country. If you are a Kenyan, you know that there are universities and even schools that are not really offering much that would define as an education or quality education. So the agreement was, if we need to attract our people to come back home, definitely they have their children who need to also maybe study in the country, then we need to make our institutions to offer a high quality of education that is incomparable to what is being offered in the diaspora. Otherwise, they will not be able to come back.
It's really difficult to say this, but I'm praying and hoping that based on the information and communication technologies that are played here today, the selfies that have been taken, the streaming that I'm sure is going on, and the coverage we're getting in local and international media, your colleagues and friends and families in other parts of the world, when we hear about next year's homecoming event, and with the support that we're also hearing from sponsors, we're going to get a very strong turnout.
Commitment that we are giving financially, but also in terms of managing this event, will make it a bigger event next year. And we want to make it an African. I think you have heard from the former minister from Ghana, who is lobbying for an African diaspora homecoming. I think next year will be the beginning of that.
And it's just been closed by the CEO of Kenya Film Classification Board.
Express my sincere gratitude to Shem and the organizers of this auspicious event for inviting me to close it. I did indicate yesterday that my board, the Kenya Film Classification Board, would take the main sponsorship next year, whatever it takes. I come to reiterate that.
So for me, I'm very happy, but above all else, I must, one, thank God. Two, I must thank my team. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
God bless.